Okay, hi everyone, and welcome to today's class. So, in the previous day, we started off with the concept of balance of payment, right? So, let me first show you what is the portion that we have already covered in your syllabus. So, we have discussed what is balance of payment. We said that it is just a systematic record of economic transactions of the residents of the country with the rest of the world. That is what is balance of payment. Then we have discussed in details what is the structure of balance of payment, where we have gone into three different accounts. In any balance of payment, you will find three different accounts. One is the current account, one is the capital account, and another one is the financial account. So we have discussed each of them, and then we have gone into the sub-components. Each of these three broad account, has different sub-components. So we have discussed that, and we have also seen what are the components which fall into each of these sub-components, right? So this is the first thing that we have done. Then we have seen an example of balance of payment with respect to India. After that, we have said what are the different kinds of disequilibrium situation that might happen in case of balance of payment, right? So we have defined different kind of deficits. Disequilibrium can be in terms of surplus or in terms of deficit. So we have here discussed 5 different types of deficits, right? If you haven't seen that lecture, please do that first before going into today's lecture, right? And the third and the final thing that we have discussed in the previous video was certain government policies. If disequilibrium is present, it can be in terms of surplus, it can be in terms of deficit. If any kind of disequilibrium is present, then how will government government will take policies to correct this kind of disequilibrium? And there we have seen three different policies. The first policy was the expenditure switching policy. Here we mainly focus on boosting the export of the country, right? Boosting the export of the nation. Some tools is mainly used. They are basically the devaluation or depreciation. This is the first tool. Tariffs and import restrictions can be there. Export promotion measures, these are there. Now in the second kind of policy, which is the expenditure reducing policy, here we try to try to contract the overall demand of the domestic economy. That is how you will limit the disequilibrium that is present in your economy, BOP deficit basically. And the third policies that we have discussed is the exchange rate policy. Since we are talking about exports and imports in your balance of payment account, exchange rate has a very crucial role to play, and we have seen them in details, right? So that is what we have done, and we have solved certain questions. Now in today's video, what we will do, we will start off with some theories and some models which relate to BOP adjustment. So different economists at different times have given us different theories and models to depict the adjustment scenario, because see, BOP depends on the export and import situation of a nation. Basically, the transaction portion, the open economy is the export sector or the import sector. BOP adjustment depends on that, and there are many factors which affect this export and import. So depending on those factors, different economists has given us different theories to find out what will be the kind of adjustment in the short run, in the long run, in the medium run, what will be the kind of adjustment in BOP, and what are the factors which basically affect this adjustment. Depending on that, different theories and models have been proposed. So that is what we are going to study today. So basically, there are two basic approaches that we will do. First is the elasticity approach. Elasticity approach to BOP adjustment. Here, the focus will be how the price elasticity of demand of export and import impact the BOP adjustment, right? So by the name, it's absolutely going by the name. Elasticity means we will focus on how the price elasticity of demand of export and export, and we will find out how it influences the currency devaluation. And as we know, if devaluation happens, export is getting boosted, and the import will be contracted because imports are getting more expensive. So devaluation is a tool which will impact the export and import situation of a country. But we will see how the price elasticity plays a crucial role in order to impact this currency devaluation. So basically, elasticity of export and elasticity import, these are acting as the factors which will impact the devaluation of currency. And this devaluation of currency will in turn impact the export and import scenario of the country. So indirectly, this elasticity, price elasticity of demand of export and import is impacting both the exports and imports. And in turn, if this export and import is getting affected, then BOP is also getting affected by this, right? BOP adjustment is taking place to this export and import. So price elasticity of demand of export and import has a very crucial role to play in order to affect the overall BOP adjustment in the country. Now, how do you measure that? How do you measure this impact? What is the criteria for that? This is measured by something called the Marshall-Lerner index. How this elasticity, price elasticity of demand of export and import affects BOP adjustment in terms of devaluation with the help of the tool devaluation is measured by the Marshall-Lerner condition. It's a very, very, very important question from your UGC NET point of view. Many questions have come. We will solve questions after this. So see, devaluation improves BOP according to Marshall-Lerner condition. Devaluation will improve BOP only if the sum of absolute values of export and import elasticity is strictly greater than 1. So what this tells you is that if you take the elasticity, price elasticity of demand of export, the absolute value of that, and the price elasticity of import, take the absolute value of that, if this summation is strictly greater than 1, right? If this summation, the sum of price elasticities of demand of export and import, if it is strictly greater than 1, then devaluation will improve BOP. Devaluation will improve. Devaluation will improve the BOP scenario. Then the second condition is that if this is absolutely equals to 1, if this summation is absolutely equals to 1, devaluation has no impact on BOP. Has no impact on BOP. And there is a third scenario, if this elasticities value is less than 1, then devaluation worsen BOP. So these are the three conditions which are known as the Marshall-Lerner condition, which basically tells you how the elasticity, price elasticity of demand of export and import is affecting BOP adjustments through the tool of devaluation. Using the tool of devaluation, how export and import is getting affected, which in turn is helping in adjustment of BOP in general. So these are the three conditions. Any conditions might come in your exam. So what will happen when it is greater than 1? What will happen when it is exactly equals to 1? What will happen when it is less than 1? So all these three things have to be remembered, right? And there is, again, derivations and explanations and all. But for your UGC NET examination, that derivation is not necessary. So I haven't done that. We will only stick to the syllabus, what is needed for your exam, right? If the absolute value of elasticity, sum of elasticity is strictly greater than 1, then we will say devaluation will improve BOP. If it is exactly equals to 1, devaluation has no impact on BOP. And if it is strictly less than 1, then devaluation will worsen BOP. So elasticity approach to BOP adjustment basically relies on the Marshall-Lerner condition. Remember this fact. Now, if this Marshall-Lerner condition holds, then we can find out something called the J-curve effect. What is J-curve effect? J-curve effect basically traces out the adjustment process. We know what will be the direction of adjustment depending on this elasticity. That is given by Marshall-Lerner. We know if this value is greater than 1, the balance will improve. Otherwise, there could be no effect or the balance will decrease. Now, how do you visually see? How do you see this adjustment process? This adjustment process will look something like this J, the English, this alphabet J. That is why it is known as the J-curve effect. See here, after devaluation, suppose devaluation takes place, the trade balance worsen initially before improving over time. So if you see this diagram here, I have given this diagram to you. So see on the right, on the horizontal axis, we measure the time. On the vertical axis, we measure the balance of trade. Basically, we are looking at the trade adjustment. So trade deficit, remember, import minus export, value of imports minus value of export, that was the trade. If you are exporting more than import, then you will have trade surplus. If your import is more than export, you will have trade deficit. So see, if you are above this 0, then you will have positive balance of trade. So this is BOT. This is BOT, balance of trade basically. So if you are above this axis, then you will have positive surplus in your balance of trade. And if you are in the negative side, you will have deficit in your balance of trade. Now, what happens if you devalue? If your currency get devaluation means what? Your value of the currency is getting lower with respect to the foreign currency, right? In case of devaluation means the value of your currency is going down, coming down with respect to the foreign currency. If this happens, what will happen? The exports will become cheaper, the imports will become more expensive. So eventually, if you devalue, exports will start to rise and import will start to fall. So if this happens, your trade should improve, your trade balance should improve. See, export, if it is more than import, then your trade should be in surplus. Trade should be in surplus, not in the deficit. But as soon as you devalue, this is a time-consuming process. This process that export will go up and import will come down, it does not happen instantaneously. Suppose today you devalue your currency. It's not that from the next day onwards your export will go up and your import will come down. It takes some time lag. It takes some time lag. In that particular time lag, your trade will be initially going into deficit. See this curve in the short run. See, this is the short run and this is the long run. In the long run, we know that trade balance will improve because this process, this outcome will come into picture. But initially when you devalue, what will happen? Initially, after devaluation, trade balance will initially worsen because it will take some time to have this adjustment. Import prices move faster than the export price. Import price changes move faster than the export price. So basically, in the short run, in the very short period of time, you will see your trade balance will initially, it will worsen and then it will start to shoot up in the long run. So basically, this diagram is showing you the impact of devaluation, which is led by this Marshall-Lerner condition, right? Which is led by this Marshall-Lerner. So depending on the Marshall-Lerner condition, you will trace out the adjustment process. This is J-curve effect is basically the visual depiction of this BoP adjustment. Marshall-Lerner condition will give you the direction and the intensity, but J-curve effect will give you the visual depiction of how this adjustment is taking place. In general, it will take the shape of the J, the English alphabet J. That is why it is known as the J-curve. So it is basically tracing out the path of adjustment of BoP, both in the short run and the long run. So in the short run, it will only come down, down, down. So only BoP balance of trade will be only in deficit. Trade balance will only be in deficit. Imports will be more than the exports initially because the adjustment will take some time. After that, exchange rate will take its role. Also, the import price and the export prices will move. So import prices move faster than the export price. That is also another reason of this thing, right? So eventually your trade balance will be in surplus and it will continuously be improved if the Marshall-Lerner condition holds. So Marshall-Lerner is the mathematical condition which gives you this adjustment, and J-curve is the visual depiction which actually shows you the path. It traces out the path in which this BoP adjustment takes place, right? I hope this is clear. So this is basically the elasticity approach of balance of payment. Elasticity approach relies on Marshall-Lerner condition and J-curve effect. Here we find out how the price elasticity of demand of export and import is helping in adjustment of BoP using the tool of devaluation, right? I hope this explanation is now clear to you. Now let us go into the second approach, which is known as the absorption approach. This is also a BoP adjustment approach, second approach. First one is the elasticity approach, second one is the absorption approach. Now this approach was proposed by Alexander in the year 1952. Now what this theory tells you is that it emphasizes the BoP depends on national income and national expenditure. So if you remember, Y equals to C plus I plus B plus X minus L, right? Aggregate demand is this. Aggregate demand equals to aggregate supply. So this is the criteria that we know. Now, according to this absorption approach, this C plus I plus D, that is the consumption demand plus the investment demand plus the government demand, these three terms are together known as the absorption by the domestic economy. This is known as the domestic absorption. The total demand that is being made from the domestic side, right? And this is the national income. This is Y is the national income, and A, the component A, which is C plus I plus G, which is representing all these three components. This is the domestic absorption. This is the national income. And this is the export minus import. This is the, basically, this will give you the change in the BoP. This will help you to find out the BoP adjustment. So the BOP adjustment according to absorption approach is dependent on national income minus the total absorption. And this theory tells you if the absorption is more than the national income, then the BOP will be in deficit. Otherwise, it will be in surplus. So that is what this absorption approach is telling you. Now see, BOP is equals to national income minus domestic absorption. That is exactly what I wrote here. So where domestic absorption is consumption, investment, and government spending. Please remember this equation. This will help you. Identity. This will help you. If the country spends more than it earns, then the BOP will be in deficit. If the spending, absorption is basically a spending. What you are demanding, what you are spending basically. So if your absorption is more than your national income, then the BOP will be strictly in deficit, which you can see from here. If A is greater than Y, BOP will be in deficit. If it is other way around, then BOP will be in surplus. So if you are spending more than your income, if your domestic spending is more than your domestic income, then the BOP will be in deficit, which is this adjustment, this value will be negative. And if it is more, if your spending is less than the income, then you will be having surplus in your BOP. So this is the absorption approach to BOP adjustment, which was given by Alexander in the year 1950, right? So we have understood what is elasticity approach and what is absorption approach. Now let us solve some questions on this. This is UGC NET June 2015 assertion reasoning question. Assertion says Marshall-Lerner condition should be fulfilled if devaluation needs to be successful, which is absolutely right, which is what we have seen. If devaluation, so if Marshall-Lerner condition is the first condition, that is the absolute value, sum of absolute values of price elasticity demand is greater than 1. If that holds, then only devaluation will be successful in impacting BOP positively. And the reasoning says devaluation makes exports costly and imports cheaper. Is this true? What do you think? Exports costly, imports cheaper. It's the other way around. Devaluation makes export cheaper and imports costly. So what will be the right answer? Right answer will be option C. A is correct. The assertion is correct, but the reasoning is not a correct answer of the assertion. See here. Explanation A is correct because devaluation improves BOP only if the elasticity is strictly greater than, sum of elasticity is strictly greater than 1, which is the Marshall-Lerner condition. But the reasoning is incorrect because devaluation makes exports cheaper, not costly, and imports costlier, not cheaper. Right? So this is a question directly from Marshall-Lerner condition June 2015. Then the next question is the December 2014 question, match list 1 and list 2. So let me show you the entire list. So these are the 4 components you have in each of the list 1 and list 2. So you have to match. The first option is saying sum of price elasticity of demand for export and import is greater than unity. What will be this from the list 2? It will be simply the Marshall-Lerner condition, right? So this we have seen so far. A is 3. Then you have balance of payment is the difference between national income and expenditure. This we have just seen. That will be what? Absorption approach, right? So we have just seen Y minus A will be the change in the BOP, basically adjustment of BOP. So the balance of payment will be the difference between national income and the expenditure is basically the absorption. Expenditure is basically the domestic demand and the absorption basically, which is in terms by this absorption approach. So B will be what? B will be option number 4. Now see the third option. It says empirical evidence showing lower short-run price elasticities of export and import. This will be given by the J-curve effect, right? We have seen this just now. In the short run, see, this is an empirical evidence. So J-curve was tested empirically. So it is an empirical evidence of showing lower short-run price elasticity. So this is the thing. So in the short run, it is getting lower. So lower short-run price elasticities of export and import. This will be given by the J-curve. And the final is method to cut down imports. That is the import quota system, which we haven't covered already, but we will do this in the probably in the next video. We'll go into the trade barriers, tariff barriers, and all the other kind of barriers. We'll discuss that. So this will be the right kind of matching. A is 3. Let me come down. Let me come down and match it. See, here D will be the right option. A is 3, B 4, C 1 and D 2. Yes. So this is the right option, and here you can see I have added the explanation also. This we have just seen, right? All the concepts that we have just seen, question is on that. So this is one of the portions of in your syllabus where we have understood different approaches to measure the adjustment of BoP. But now after this, what we will go into is the important hypothesis and paradoxes which is related to BoP. BoP and basically the terms of how the terms of trade is affecting BoP and the other way around. So that is what we will study. So there are certain important hypotheses and paradoxes. Many questions in UGC NET is coming from this particular portion. So please prepare this well. See, understand that the first hypothesis that we will understand is the Prebisch-Singer hypothesis. Prebisch-Singer hypothesis, which is the terms of trade decline for developing nations. So what this theory basically tells you is that if you are a developing nation, right? If you are a developing nation, just like India, just like China, just like all the Southeast Asian nations. So we are the developing nations. We are growing economically. We are in the stage of, we are not completely developed. We are in the stage of development. So basically we are developing nations. So most of these developing nations, what we do is that we basically export primary goods. Primary goods means what? Basically the raw materials. We don't usually sell the final product. We sell basically the raw materials to produce the final. We are not a manufacturing country. Manufacturing sector is way lesser, in value than the service sector that is in India. India is a service sector based industry. China is a manufacturing industry. China has advantage in that aspect. But India as a whole is not a manufacturing country. We always export the primary goods. Primary goods are always low value goods. If you are not exporting the final good, then the value of raw materials that you are selling, it's not that much. Primary goods, since the final value has been not added, you cannot use it for the final consumption. The price of primary good is always lower. Now, do you remember what is terms of trade? Terms of trade is basically price of export upon the price of import. So if you are selling only the primary good and you are getting lesser price for that, so your numerator is low. And in general, we import the final goods. So final goods have a higher price. So this is high. If the numerator is low and the denominator is high, this terms of trade is declining. This is what is said by the Prebisch-Singer hypothesis, that we might think that yes, we are exporting the goods, but what kind of goods are we exporting? We have to also focus on the quality of goods that we are exporting. If you are exporting low quality goods, low value, no, not low quality, low value goods, then the price that you will pay, price that you will charge for the good will be also lower. So eventually in the long run, the terms of trade for the developing nations are coming down. They are declining due to this export and import situation, right? So this is what is said by the Prebisch-Singer, which is basically a paradox, which is basically a very important paradox, because we are thinking that yes, we are growing, we are exporting things, but eventually we'll see in the long run, we are not getting benefited from such trade. That is the paradox. You see here now that it states, Prebisch-Singer hypothesis states that terms of trade deteriorate for primary goods exporting countries, specifically the developing countries. This is a very important concept. Questions come from this. We'll solve the question in a while. So the terms of trade that will deteriorate for the primary goods exporting countries. Countries which export primary goods. The example that I have give you. So basically primary goods exporting countries, specifically the developing nations, they will be not getting any benefit. They will not get any benefit from such trade. Even though we think that yes, we are importing and exporting with other nations, but eventually our terms of trade will not improve from this kind of trade. So in the long run, we are not getting any sort of benefit from the trading with other nations, right? So what are the reasons for that? First is low income elasticity of demand for the primary goods. So basically, it's not that if we don't export the primary good, nobody else will get it. We are not selling something which has some unique value proposition. Right? We are not selling something which has some unique. Oh, if you have a final product which has a unique selling point, then only we are selling some high value product, final product. manufacturing, the final product on manufacturing, that has immense value. But if you are selling only the primary good, that is basically replaceable from instead of importing things from India, you can import it from Bangladesh, or you can import it from Sri Lanka, any of the, or Thailand, any of the Southeast Asian nations. They will sell similar kind of primary goods. They are exporting similar kind of primary goods. That is why they are low, they have low income elasticity. Low income elasticity means if uh, you know how do I explain it? Because they are not very valuable good. Their elasticity, they have low income elasticity, which basically means that in case of price, the price elasticity will be very much fluctuating, but income elasticity, with respect to income, elasticity will be lower due to this value. It has to relate with the value of the good, because primary goods are low in value. Now, the second point says technological progress benefits industrial nations more. So if you are in an industrial nation like USA, like China, so you will produce in bulk. Basically, industrial goods are being produced in bulk, and whenever you produce something in bulk, you have some cost advantage, which we call as the economies of scale, right? If you are in a nation which is technologically sound, and also you have some resources to produce, primary resources to produce the thing, then as an industrial nation you will benefit more from the nation who is selling you the primary good, because you are adding value to the final. You are producing the high value good, you are producing the final good that has definitely higher value, and that will basically give the benefit to the industrial nations and not to the developing nations. That is what is said by Prebisch-Singer. And the third thing is that monopoly pricing power of developed nations over the industrial goods. So again, if you are selling a high value final product, then you will have some sort of monopoly power. If you are the sole producer of some final product, then you will set the price according to your expectations. You are the sole price setter. Basically, you will set the price. You will become a monopolist, or so as monopolist or oligopolist in the world economy, and you will be getting the benefit. So this theorem only tells you that the developing nations eventually in the long run are not getting better. Though in the short run we feel that yes, we have a good trade balance, we are exporting more than importing. Our trade balance of trade might improve in the short run, but in the long run, in terms of trade basically determines the gain from trade. So the terms of trade eventually is declining for developing nations, and it is improved eventually in the long run for the developed. So eventually the developed nations are getting benefited from trade. As a developing nations, we are not benefiting from it. Though it seems like we are benefiting, we are actually not benefiting. That is the paradox which was propounded by Prebisch-Singer, known as Prebisch-Singer hypothesis. So policy implication, need for diversification and industrialization in the developing nations. So we cannot only rely on exporting primary goods. We have to start manufacturing our own goods. We have to be Atmanirbhar, basically. We have to not only export primary goods, but also we should export the manufactured goods, export the final products for our own good, right? So we need more diversification, more industrialization in the developing nations to improve this situation. This is the first paradox known as Prebisch-Singer hypothesis. I hope this is clear. Now let us go to Jagdish Bhagwati's theorem, which is the Immiserizing Growth theorem. So this is again a paradox. So this paradox was proposed by Jagdish Bhagwati in the year 1958. It also tells you about the terms of trade. See, it occurs when a country experiences economic growth but becomes worse off due to declining terms of trade. It's almost a similar thing. Jagdish Bhagwati also pointed out the same thing. For example, see, a developing country expands exports of primary commodity, but excessive supply. So just a little tweak in the explanation which is given by Prebisch-Singer. See, but the excessive supply lowers the global price, reducing the export earnings. So what Jagdish Bhagwati tells you is that if you, okay, you are exporting primary goods. You are in India, you are exporting primary goods. Fine, we are exporting low value commodities. But as soon as you keep on exporting these commodities, your supply, the supply of the primary good in the global market is getting higher. And whenever supply is more than the demand, the price will be lower. This we know from the normal demand supply, considerations. So we know if you have excess supply in the market, the price of the product will come down. So not only due to the low value of the primary commodity, but also due to the excess supply. Due to the excess supply of the commodity in the world market, the price, the global price that you will get for the commodity, the primary good is lower, as a result of which your export earnings will be lower. Right? This you can understand the raw materials that we sell outside, they are itself low in value. So that valuation part is explained by the Prebisch-Singer hypothesis, paradox. But what Jagdish Bhagwati is adding on upon this is that as you keep on exporting these goods, there will be excess supply. There will come a point when there will be excess supply of these goods in the global market, as a result of which the per unit price of the product is getting lower, as a result of which your export earning is lower. So eventually, again, the terms of trade of your nation will come down if you are a developing nation who is exporting primary goods. So the conclusion is the same, but the explanation, the way of explaining things is a little different. So Jagdish Bhagwati basically added on the Prebisch-Singer approach. He has given a little different thing, that excessive supply is also adding on to that. This might also be a reasoning for declining terms of trade for the economy. So basically, if economic growth takes place, if exports are rising, we are saying economic growth is taking place, but eventually that is not helping in your nation in the long run, because your terms of trade is declining eventually, and that will lower the export earnings. Right? So this is the Jagdish Bhagwati's paradox, immersing growth. This is also an important topic. So these are the two paradoxes that we have seen. We'll solve questions on this. The final thing here is the Mundell-Fleming model. Now, in case of UGC NET, again, Mundell-Fleming is in itself is a huge topic. In undergraduate and in a postgraduate level, I hope you have studied this Mundell-Fleming model, which is also known as ISLN-BP model. ISLN-BP model. And here, we don't have the scope to go into in detailed explanation. What we need to know, just like all the other theories, we need to know the outcomes. Basically, UGC NET focuses on the outcomes. So what will be the consequence if this happens? What will be the consequence of the policies? What will be the consequences of perfect capital mobility and fixed exchange rate on the policy implications? Perfect capital mobility, flexible exchange rate on policy implications. So only the effects are important, and that is what we will study here. So see, this extends, Mundell-Fleming model is basically ISLM model for open economy. We are including the effect of exchange rate into our model. So extends the ISLM model to include this BoP concept and the exchange rate effects. So what are the key features? What are the key outcomes? Question if comes will come from these lines, that fixed exchange rate. If fixed exchange rate is there and perfect capital mobility is also there, then fiscal policy will be effective, but the monetary policy will be ineffective. In case of Mundell-Fleming, we are assuming perfect capital mobility. This has to hold. For all these outcomes, this has to hold. PCM has to hold perfect capital. Perfect capital mobility means your capital can move from one direction to other direction without any sort of restriction. So I think Mahima ma'am will teach you this. This lecture is already there in your portal. Please check that out. Open Economy Mundell-Fleming model. If you want to go deeper into this, Mahima ma'am's detailed lecture is already there in your portal. Please check that out. But for our UGC NET specific course, we don't have much scope to cover this in details right now. Later on, if you want, I can also make videos on that if you need. But I know ma'am's video is there in the portal. Please check that out. And if you have any questions after this, you can also ask me. Right? So see, fixed exchange rate, if perfect capital mobility holds, then fiscal policy will be effective, monetary policy will be ineffective under Mundell-Fleming model. And if flexible exchange rate is there, again PCM is holding, then monetary policy will be effective, fiscal policy will be ineffective. So they give you questions only on these outcomes. What will be the policy implications under different exchange rate regime? That is the only question they ask you from this Mundell-Fleming model. And what is capital mobility? Determines how policies affect the output and exchange rate. As I've told you, capital under perfect capital mobility, the domestic interest rate and the world interest rate is absolutely the same. That is why the capital has full mobility, maximum amount of mobility. It can go from any direct, it can travel any direction. There is no barriers in the movement of the capital. So application is used to analyze the monetary fiscal policy effective. Mundell-Fleming is basically used for this purpose to analyze the monetary fiscal policy effectiveness under different exchange rate, right? Okay. So now let us see some questions. March 2023 recent question. It says, in the Mundell-Fleming model, the monetary policy will be more effective when? When will monetary policy be more effective? Is it perfect capital mobility, flexible exchange rate, perfect capital mobility, fixed exchange rate, imperfect capital mobility, flexible exchange rate, imperfect capital mobility, fixed exchange rate? So it will be what? It will be perfect capital mobility, flexible exchange rate, which is given here. See, if perfect capital mobility is there and flexible exchange rate is there, monetary policy will be effective. You have to remember these 2 points. And why this will happen, here I have given you small reasoning for that as well. See, if you take expansionary monetary policy, it will lower the interest rate, right? Lower the interest rate, so capital outflow will take place. If domestic interest rate is getting lower, the capital will move outward. Outward capital flow will take place. That will depreciate the currency. Your value of the currency will come down. Net and devaluation, as devaluation or depreciation occurs, the export will rise, import will fall. So the net export will rise, as a result of which national income will rise. That is why monetary policy is most effective when there is perfect capital mobility and flexible exchange, right? So this is the kind of reasoning that we give for this thing. Now let us solve some more questions. This is June 2024. Match the list 1 and list 2. So see here on the list 1, you have devaluation, immiserizing growth, automatic BoP adjustment, perfect capital mobility. List 2, flexible exchange rate, increase in export competitiveness, heavily export-based growth, and domestic interest rate pegged at the world interest. So when the domestic interest rate and the world interest rate is the same, we call it the perfect capital mobility. As I've told you, when you have perfect capital mobility, it means that the capital can move from any nation to other nations. So across the globe, capital can move. Why this is so? Because the price that we charge for the capital is absolutely the same. The domestic interest rate and the interest rate is basically the price of using that capital. So the domestic and the world interest rate is absolutely the same. That is why it is a perfect capital mobility. So D will be option number 4. Then devaluation. Devaluation will lead to increase in export competitiveness, because export will go up, import will come down. Export competitiveness will improve. So A will be option number 2. This and this is done. Then you have immiserizing growth. Immiserizing growth will be heavily export-based growth. Primary good exporting countries, basically the developing nations. So B will be option number 3. And automatic BoP adjustment will be flexible exchange. So in flexible exchange rate, the demand for currency and the supply of currency determines the exchange rate. So basically that is automatic adjustment through market mechanism. Automatic adjustment happens through market mechanism. That is why it is a flexible exchange. In case of fixed exchange rate, fixed amount, the exchange rate value is prefixed, basically predefined. So that has to be maintained in all the situations. But in case of flexible, due to market mechanism, automatic adjustment of BoP takes place. So C will be option number 1. So this will be the right sequencing. Option number C here. See, A is 2, B is 3, C is 1, and D is 4. Yes. So C will be the right answer. This is June 2024 recent year question. And here I have given you the explanation also. You can take a look at this. Absolutely the same thing I have explained. You can take a screenshot or pause the video and see this for yourself. Absolutely the same. Right? So that is all. And here I have given you a summary table for all the things that we have studied today. See, key BoP theories and models. This is basically for your revision purposes. Before the exam, you can just take a look at this, key ideas and go for the exam. This will help you in your revision. See all the things, BoP adjustment policies which we have studied in the previous day. 3 kind of policies can be there. Expenditure switching policy, which focuses on devaluation or export boosting basically. expenditure reducing policy, which is the fiscal contraction or monetary contraction, which basically reduces the demand, and there is another policy which is the exchange rate policy. These are all BOP adjustment policies taken by the government. Then elasticity and absorption approach we studied today. Elasticity approach, currency devaluation will improve BOP with the help of Marshall-Lerner condition, and the visual depiction is J-curve effect. Absorption approach is BOP depends on national income and domestic spending. BOP is national income minus the absorption. Prebisch-Singer and Immiserizing Growth, these are two paradoxes, right? These are two paradoxes. Paradoxes in case of economic growth and BOP surplus, basically BOP adjustment. So Prebisch-Singer said that developing nations face decline in terms of trade due to reliance on primary exports. So this is in one line, I have explained the essence of this theorem and all the paradoxes also. Right? So this chart is very important. And then you have immerserizing growth, where economic growth can worsen the welfare and terms of trade. They can deteriorate that significantly. That is what is given by immerserizing growth. And the final is the Mundell-Fleming model, which shows how fiscal and monetary policy effectiveness varies under different exchange rate regimes. If you want to know more about Mundell-Fleming model, you can check out Mahima ma'am's video that is there in the portal. Otherwise, if you have any questions, I can also make a separate video on this later on. So yeah, thank you so much for your time today. This is all I wanted to share in this video. And if you have any questions from the portion that we have covered so far, you can always let me know and I'll help you out with that, right? Thank you so much for your time. In the next video, we'll go into the trade barriers and all the international organizations and international treaties and agreements that has happened in case of international trade, right? So we'll go into that and stay tuned for that video, and thank you so much for your time.